It was a life and death moment for me. It's like, I'm going to take this chance because whatever I have to face on this path is better than that being stuck here. Because I saw around me what the people that didn't have it. Even I consider myself privileged to even be involved in the game of golf because that's what it did for me. So it's perspective for the most part, but also it's really like developing and adapting that attitude of gratitude mindset very early.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Make It Inevitable podcast. I am your host, Stephanie Zamora, and today I am so thrilled on the expanded series we have Vincent Kabaso. He is Zambia's first elected member of the Professional Golfers Association of America, and he founded the Raised by the World Foundation in 2017, which is also the title of his book that he released in 2020, and he has a feature film pending. Vincent, thank you so much for being here today.
I am excited to join you here today, Stephanie. Thank you so much for having me.
Me as well. Let's start with you sharing a little bit about yourself and what it is that you do.
So I am obviously from Zambia, and I grew up in Zambia. I moved to the United States about 10 years ago now. And currently, I am operating an academy as well as just a few other business interests and investments.
That is amazing. And I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm so grateful for your time. I came across you in an article and have been looking at your work and your website. And I'm looking forward to reading your book as well, because what a journey, growing
It's,
up in a country where nobody else is part of the
right,
PGA.
right.
And
It's been a journey. Yeah.
yeah, and I would love to go back to your childhood and sharing a bit about the town that you grew up in and the mentality of it and how your dad introduced you to golf and just kind of how that catalyzed everything.
Yes, so it's a very small mining town, Luansha it's called, and I was born in '87, and my dad, I am the seventh, and I've got seven siblings, so we have eight in my family, and my dad worked for the copper mines in the security department, and so they do rotational work sometimes because of his job, and at some point he did some work, some security stuff at the golf club. So this is way back in the '70s. Somebody eventually gave me a golf bag, but he didn't really have any interest at the point. But at some point along the way, he developed interest because the mine started encouraging all the employees to start to pick up a sport. And so my dad drew interest into golf from that, and he liked it, but he liked it so much. But again, the game is expensive fairly in those countries, and it's not always the cheapest because you have to pay green fees, you have to drive a caddy all the time to play. So he had tried my brother to get into it, and my other brother as well, who actually started out caddying for my dad. But he didn't really like it as much. So I was about 9 years old, coming up to my 10th birthday, that my dad got me a pushka, and he had me start carrying his bag. So I drew interest from that because I would travel with my dad to all these different tournaments. And I saw him make so many mistakes. And I somehow, my stubborn self thought I could always do better. So I think it was from really just watching him play a lot and kind of just seeing the environment that I really drew my interest. And I asked him to get me into the game. And it was very instant that the very first tournament I actually played in, I won it. And that was just love at first sight. But
Wow.
the dynamics of that smaller town is that there's not a lot happening outside of school. And we didn't have the privilege of so much outside of school extracurricular activities. So going to the golf club and just kind of seeing the affluence around the golf club was such a big draw because outside of that, me and my friends were just, playing soccer barefooted and we were, hunting for birds and mice in the local bushes. So the golf course and the golf club was was a big shift for me from what I was used to, a very, you want to call it depressing environment now, to the golf club that seemed to have a lot of vibe to it, a lot of, so much was going on and I couldn't just stop being there. So yeah, that's how I got into the game.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I would love to know what that sparked in you. So the game itself, but also being in that different environment. I know that you've said in different places that this was more than just about the sport, even back then. Like it kind of sparked a personal growth and exploration journey for you. So what did that look like?
I think, yeah, and it was very interesting because when you grow up in those environments, they're sort of they're very confining, and so outside of my small little bubble, I didn't imagine or picture a different world outside of what I used to see. Going to school, everybody's walking. Families are not really well off, so we're going to school, coming back, we're hunting for birds and mice. So that was my environment. And it's not like you really get to get outside of that environment and to see what's going on outside of that. So the golf course was my first experience to anything outside of my small little world. And that just, I think the first thing it triggered in me was just the intrigue of oh, so there's so much more than what I'm used to, but then also to see the different types of people and just the social aspect as well was just mind-boggling to me, and it's just something I really wanted to be a part of from the onset, because it was just, you couldn't compare from where I was coming from to the potential exposure that I was getting from the golf club. So
Yeah,
that was, yeah, that's where it started from.
that makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
at what point did you realize that you wanted to go pro? And I remember seeing the numbers. Was it's 17 million people in the country and fewer than 5,000 golfers, and you're the first to be a part of the PGA. And what was that process like for you to realize that it was something that you wanted to pursue professionally? And also, how do you even begin to do that when nobody has gone before you in your country?
That was an interesting part to my journey. Really, that's where it began, because I think I can put myself in that position now with greater perspective. Imagine a younger person that develops a passion for this thing, but you don't really know what that means. I don't. It's not like we didn't have the privilege of information. So I feel so drawn to this thing. I can't get over it. I can't stop thinking about it, and I want to keep doing it, but I don't see anybody kind of drawing and attracting the same attention for the game. And so it was that became my self-discovery journey. I say in my book, it's because a lot of the emotions and the attraction I felt for the game of golf I couldn't really express, and I couldn't explain to other people. So I harbored a lot of those into myself, but it felt like, especially that I was very quick at getting decent. I start playing and I'm winning, and and I'm enjoying the thrill of going to tournaments and winning these events, but always coming back to wondering what else is there. It's like I want to do more. I feel there's more I can do. There's more in me, and and it was a tough thing because again, my mentality was still very 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 small in that aspect of I was very limited to my environment. And so I remember we had magazines in the pro shop of the locker rooms of the golf club, and I would look at those magazines and I would see the different types of people and all these beautiful golf courses, but somehow there was a big disconnect between myself and them, because number one, I didn't
Mm,
see anybody that looked like me, but then
yeah.
also it was, I somehow just ignorantly thought they were a different species. I didn't put myself in that position, and which was resonative to the people around me. But the more I got inquisitive and started to pursue this, I started feeling like that's kind of what I want to do. And that's where I really began my self-discovery journey of, okay, what does this mean to be a professional golfer? What is there in this? And that's when I really began my pursuit of just looking up all the magazines, reading. That's when I really developed my passion for reading, I think.
That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense when it's something that you want to learn more about. And reading, whether it's online or magazines, is such a great way to get information and to start learning about it. And I appreciate you sharing this so much, especially the piece of not seeing anyone that looks like you and feeling like
Uh-huh.
they're a different species from you, because there are so many people that want to do something.
Right, right,
And sometimes there's no example of that. And sometimes there's examples, but they don't look like you. Their backgrounds are
right.
different. Their experience,
Uh-huh.
their resources, whatever it might be, their privilege is different. And
Right.
what was it like for you? Was there anything that you had to do or anything that helped you kind of bridge that gap between, oh, they're different? And for some people, they think of that as like they must be special or lucky or
Right.
better or whatever it is. Like, what shifted for you, or what helped you to be like, I could do this too. Like, why not go for it?
I think it came from my dad. My dad was a very positive human being, and we never had these conversations about, you can do this and all these motivational conversations. But just from me observing him and the way he conducted himself, he carried himself with such confidence and so well that I
Mm.
never, even when he was around people that had more seniority than him, all these mining executives and all these big bosses in the mines, he still carried himself so well. So I think that was an instinctive draw, and I drew inspiration from that but then also it helped that I was doing well because even some of my, the whiter kids or like, the different kids from different parts of the world, um, I felt like I would go to the golf club maybe on an empty stomach. But during
Mm.
the round of golf, at some point, it made me feel such a great sense of peace because I know that was my common ground.
Ah,
Everybody was the same. And at that point, I knew that they're not going to beat me. And me winning, I was building a lot of confidence very quickly just from winning and having them talk about me as the one that won. And somehow the golf course, I think that's why the game has always been more than a game for me. It's because it was my place of self identity. It was kind of, it felt like that was the perfect place for me to express myself. So playing golf, winning, not that it was just about winning, but really just doing well and being focused, felt like that was the one moment I could really express myself without any judgment or feeling like I needed to do any better. Granted, I didn't even have a whole set of golf clubs. I made do with what we had, but
right.
somehow I just found my peace on the golf course. So I think a lot of inspiration was from my dad, but then also the fact that I was able to do well gave me a lot of confidence doing it.
There's something so powerful too about doing what you're called to do, even if it's not ultimately what you do for the rest of your life. But I really love how
Right?
you reflected almost a sense of feeling at home, even if there was
Yes.
challenges and obstacles and other people and other things going on. Like, you just, that's where you were supposed to be.
Yes. And I think it's, I think we learn early from that culture, especially like in a big background to that is that there's eight of us. We never have enough in the house. Food, like the basic
Mm.
common essentials, we never had enough. And you learn very quickly to do what you can with what you have. That is the one lesson that you learn in those cultures. It's like people can make the most with the very least amount of things.
Yeah.
And being in that environment for me was that it was that this is what I have, and for some reason, it I always knew it was a privilege from the beginning because I knew that my friends are not playing this. The people that I grew up with, the kids that I'm found with at school, at the social circles at church or anywhere, nobody's coming closer to the golf club. So I knew this was a different step from what I'm used to in my normal regular environment. So I think it was more like I noticed that was an opportunity from the beginning, and having the support of my dad really propelled the interest and accelerated my passion when I was in the moment.
And in the same vein, I remember reading that it was age 19, I believe, when you went to the UK. And I would love to hear more about this part of the journey because you went there.
Yeah.
Um, was that your first time leaving the country?
No, I had because so I had started playing for Zambia national team at 13. So we used to play the regional games. So I'd gone to like South Africa, been on a
Okay.
plane, stayed in a hotel. But the UK was a whole different experience altogether. First of all, what I went at that point, I had gone through the struggle of this is what I want to do. I don't have anybody around me to support me. And even when I expressed my desires, my interest to my dad, he didn't really understand it and he didn't have the money to support it.
Yeah.
So at this point, it was a very, very personal journey because this is what I wanted to do and I was very determined to make it happen regardless. So I don't know if you want to talk about that aspect or the UK aspect because there's two
Both.
different sides.
Yeah,
It's
whichever one you want to start with, because I know there was also the point of being there where you ran out of resources. And
yes.
so, whichever one you want to start with, let's
So I
cover
think
both.
I think the story starts from when I was in Zambia doing well and drawing a lot of attention. And making a name for myself. There was a guy that we all looked up to, Madarito Mutia. He was really good. He played in the US Open, and he's a fantastic guy and has done well so well for himself. He got a scholarship. And at that point, our minds opened up to, like, you play golf, you do so well. The next stage is to get a scholarship. But we started hitting roadblocks at that point because I got to a point where I was good enough to play all these international events. And remember, again, growing up, it's like, because you don't see anything else, what you have, you never really consider the fact that you don't have enough. It's when I started exposing myself and seeing what other friends I started making around the golf club had. That's when I started noticing the things that we didn't have. Things like a car, for instance. Things like golf clubs, like golf shoes. I started noticing those things when I started getting that exposure. And it was, I don't think my dad or myself could have planned it anywhere, because this was supposed to be a game that I was doing so well and getting all these prizes and winning. But at the same time, it became kind of like a point of lonely reflection, because I think that my dad saw my potential and he felt a different type of way because he couldn't necessarily provide everything for me. And then also for me, it was noticing what all these other kids had, and noticing and kind of seeing the difference between not having and having, and just understanding privilege and knowing that I have the potential, I have the ability, but I don't have all the right tools to support me. So, and it was at that point, I think, right around high school, that we started looking into scholarships. I was ranked in the top 5 in the country at that point. And at one point, I won a tournament, and I was announced that I was getting a scholarship. And that's when we really hit our biggest roadblock, because we realized very quickly that some point in life, it's not so much what you know, it's who you know. So some things happened that eventually we didn't hear anything about the scholarship that I had supposedly won, and we realized privilege and all of those things started happening. So it was disappointing in a way. And when you're doing so well, you have everybody coming at you. So I felt like people were there to look out for me. And I think reality hit me very quickly, especially after I finished high school. I waited 1 year, and into my second year, nothing was happening. I realized very quickly that I have to take ownership. I have to start finding a way to do this for myself, because if I don't, nobody's coming to serve me. And so that's when that was a point that I wrote about 1,500 letters. I assume that I was just writing sometimes without a stamp, and I'll throw them in the post office, and hopefully somebody hears me back, writes me back. And then at some point, I get now a response from the PGA of Britain, and they said that they would give me a scholarship through the RNA, but that there was a big balance that I needed to still find. That is when the money journey really started, because it's like, okay, I have a chance to go to the UK. I know this is my one chance. And if I don't take this chance, I could clearly see what my life would be, which is very, very, very limiting if I don't take on the chance. So we struggled just to find the £1,500 for me to pay the balance and to get a ticket to the UK. That's when it really started. And at that point, my dad had a very straight conversation with me. He said, listen, I do not have the money for you to go to the UK, and I don't know what we could do. We tried to sell the house. It was like very, very
Wow.
extreme measures we tried to take at that point. And we had no other way to raise the money. We tried to find loan sharks, so because you couldn't get loans from the bank and things like that. It was just depressing at that stage. And so it got to the point where I have an acceptance letter to the UK. I don't have the balance, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna have to figure it out. So eventually, we get a loan. My dad's friend lends us some money for me to get a ticket, and I find myself in the UK without the money to study. And so I always say, college is supposed to be a very fun time for young kids to get into college and be excited and all of these things. But I knew going to the UK that as soon as I got there, all the money that I needed for me to survive and to pay for everything was dependent on how I find my way around the country, and I wasn't expecting my parents to bring anything out for me. So that was tough.
Yeah.
I did enjoy the UK of like, great experience you going in the UK, but that never left the back of my mind of what I had to do to make things happen for me. But I think that introduces me to the next step of my story, which is people and how just building relationships and all of these things and compassion and empathy and all of these things. And maybe that's where I started drawing my own experiences of wanting to help out because one of my very pivotal moments over there was we had a meeting with the head of the international students and the director of the program. Basically, she stopped me and said, "Do you have the money to stay in the UK?" And I said, "My father said he's going to sell his house, and if he sells the house, he's going to send me the money." And I picture and I saw this guy. His name was Jonathan. He started in this whole meeting. He's the one that had been responding to me in the letters because initially I had never sat on a computer at this point. I would write a letter. It would take 3 weeks to get to the UK. They would write me back. So he's like, "You need to set up an email address." I had never heard of this. And so I set up an email address and we start communicating. So I'm sitting in this meeting with Jonathan and this person, and he's just looking at me the whole time, like literally just staring at me the whole time. And I'm crying. I'm like, there was, I think there was also a part of me that ignorantly maybe thought that things in the Western world are different. Like I'll just go in there, somebody would throw money at me. I didn't realize the concept of any place of the world that you find yourself in, you have to put in the work. So that was also a bit shocking to me because I get over there thinking, maybe somebody would just be, sympathetic towards me and they'll give me everything I needed. But it was not like that. So she basically told me that you have a month. If you don't find the balance for you to pay for your school, we're gonna have to send you back home. And this is when reality hit me. Like it was never getting easier. It felt like the more I really wanted to pursue this golf dream, I wanted it so bad, and I just kept hitting these roadblocks. But I remember Jonathan calling me to the side after that meeting, and I can't remember what the conversation was, but he taps me on the shoulder. He's like, "Let's see what we can do for you." And I think after him understanding my story, he realized that I really needed help. I was a kid that had the discipline. I was, willing to put in the work, but I just didn't have the resources and things that I really couldn't control. And I think him noticing that gave him a different perspective of where I was really coming from. So I think that was a trigger for him to take it upon himself to really just, take interest in me personally and
Yeah.
want to support me. So he eventually found a way for me. He gave me his personal money for me to finish up the studies of that program and eventually sending me to St. Andrews, Scotland for me to go and finish my training originally over there. But I think it was also at that point that I realized that you talk about the topic of your podcast. That's when I realized that if this is ever going to happen, because faith has always been a really big part of my journey.
Yeah.
But I realized at that point that if this ever happened, it's not something I'm going to take credit that I made happen by myself. It was only because I think God's got a bigger plan for me and He's out there looking out for me. So that's when I really came to my realistic terms of what it means to believe in something and to
Yeah.
also know that whatever you believe in, you can't make it happen by yourself. You need an outside influence. And that's where God came in for me. So that was a very, very, very important time of my life.
It
Sorry, I
sounds like
digress.
it. No, that was great. And you hit on so many important things. And the first one, which is at the end of all of that, was we can't do anything alone.
Right.
And I talk about that a lot because a lot of people in my audience, and I've had this before too, like we're afraid to lean on people, or we've had trauma from relationships or childhood or whatever it is. And so it feels like I've got to be hyper independent. I've got to do this myself. And the reality is we literally cannot do anything without other people
You
in
can't.
some way. And
Nobody's
the
ever
more,
designed like that.
no.
Yeah.
And the sooner that you learn that and the more you learn to work with other people and to be vulnerable in that and surrendered in that, like the better. And another thing that you modeled really beautifully that we talk a lot about on this show is the power of decision.
Yes.
And I believe in taking leaps, but I think where we can go wrong with that is when we take a leap with like that false mindset, which it sounds like you kind
Yes.
of figured out. Like if I just do it, then the world will rush and catch me.
Right.
And that doesn't happen. It's more likely for you to find that that support, to have that net, to figure out the next step, though, when you're committed to taking the step, which you had no
Right.
idea how you were going to do it,
Right.
but you were going to figure it out one way or another. And even having those conversations and being willing to be vulnerable and to express your emotions in that, and to let people see, like, I really want to be here and this is really important to me. And this is the risk that I took, that I might end up having to go home if I don't figure it out. Like, it's so beautiful. And I can only imagine how hard that was, and maybe even uncomfortable. But I so appreciate you sharing all of that and modeling all of that, because a lot of people are afraid of that. Like, you
Yes.
very easily could have been sent home and then you
Very
would have
easily.
had to
Yeah.
figure something else out, but you took the risk. And when we take those risks and we're committed and decided, the odds can't help but shift in our favor, because you were willing to
Yes.
take that leap where someone else might have been like, I don't have the money, never mind.
You're right, right. And I think a big part of that, and thank you for sharing that, is that unfortunately we grow up in these comfortable environments where we don't see a lot of people doing these things. And I think that for me, my privilege, if I had any privilege, was that I didn't have anything. And that allowed me to really stretch myself, because I think in the place of all the information, if I knew exactly what it would take for me to get to my dreams or to achieve anything, I don't believe I would have started. I think not knowing everything that it was going to take for me was really a good motivation, because I was only concerned with the next step and to
Yeah.
focus on that next step. And that step gets you to the point, by the time you're looking back, you've stretched so far that you can't go back at any point. And so I think that it's society and culture and all of these things come in, because sometimes we get so comfortable with our environments that it's very difficult to just, make the smallest of decisions. And I think that anybody that really wants to stretch has to get themselves to that point where comfortable doesn't look comfortable anymore, or you have to shift your environments to really just, aim a little higher than what's standard. And I think for me, it was a lot of self drive, because I can imagine a situation if my parents, like the stuff that I had to do. I don't know what parent would let their child just go to a different country when they don't
Yeah.
have anything. So it was the ignorance of me and my family not knowing really what this is all about, and just basically taking a chance and relying on a 17-year-old giving them a chance, like, oh, when I go over there, if I play well, somebody can sponsor me. Just looking at all the things that you wouldn't imagine. But I'm very thankful for, because I think, again, it goes back to my faith. That is really where that invincible person comes in to me, which is God. It's like, if you're willing to really stretch you to those points, He's there to catch you. But in that absence, there's no movement. Like, you have to really meet Him at that sometimes very scary point. And it's not just about golf, it's really life. Like, you have to get to where it stops being comfortable. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I
Yes.
think that's where outside forces come in. So it's been a journey more than just pursuing a dream. It's really been like, okay, this is really what life is all about. Because at that point is really when I actually started writing. It's like, 'cause I knew that if this ever happens, I'm gonna want to share these experiences. So I started collecting notes. Like, before I got to these meetings, I would just it was like a divine inspiration. It's like, I have to write about this, because everything, every little detail you could look at points to me not having a chance. I don't belong in these places. I
Yeah.
don't belong in these positions. I don't have the ability and the capacity to sustain this. But I'm in these positions because I have nothing but my heart driving me into this. So that's where it got interesting for me.
Absolutely. And again, you're modeling so many great things to so many people. And there's a few things I want to touch on. The first, and you've shared this throughout our conversation, not having the resources, not having the means, not having the equipment and the shoes and the things that other people have, and coming from a background where you learned to live with less, and in many ways didn't even realize that you were. I know that there are a lot of people out there who feel like what makes what they want impossible is the lack of resource, is the lack of, I don't have the latest gear, I don't have the privilege. There's absolutely systems in play that limit certain people from
Right.
progressing and hold them
Uh-huh.
back and are harmful to them. And so I don't want to ever diminish that having the lack of resources or equipment or education or money or whatever it may be isn't a real obstacle, because it
Right.
absolutely is. And depending
Absolutely.
on
Yeah.
where you
Yeah.
are and who you are, it's
Uh-huh.
bigger and harder. And still, what you've modeled so beautifully is that doesn't mean that it's impossible.
Right. And I think it's when you really consider that topic and look at all the intricacies of everything it takes, right? It's sometimes, and I think for me that really where I really understood gratitude is because when you can understand to make the very most of the least things, anything you get, any advantage you get, you see it as a privilege. So there's really no entitlement at that stage. And sometimes, again, it's cultural and sometimes environments, and depending on where you are, uh, once you've seen what, like for instance, right now, there's so many different topics in culture, in golf, and politics. It's like, oh, you have to have been from this family. You have to have grown up with so much. You
Mm-hmm.
have to have had this to get into any of those schools. I never, and I've never looked at life that way. My concept has always been that if I really feel that I can do something, I will push myself to do and focus on the things that I can manage within myself. Anything that's outside of my control, I really have no control over. But to the best of my ability, I will apply myself. If I felt like I wanted to get into Harvard right now, promise you I'll get into Harvard. Because I think it's you have to get to the point where you realize that you are all you got. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we are in these positions where we have to, and there's a balance. We have to depend so much. It's very easy to make an excuse at any level. At any level, it's very easy to justify why you shouldn't do something. But I think I also learned it very early that in any conditions, if you think it's too hot in Texas right now to go outside, well, go outside, you're going to see somebody outside. If you think it's too cold in Minnesota, can wake out in the snow, go outside, you're going to see somebody doing the things that you don't want to do. And I think it's very easy to just play the blame game and just throw it at somebody else or throw it at different thing that you don't have. And it's going to be justifiable. And I think it's because like the privilege of this culture, especially in the Western countries, is that even in the absence of really going for that one thing you really should go for, there's a decent, fairly comfortable fallback plan. You can end up working a regular job and you should still, you can get by. In those environments, like for me, it's knowing that this chance, whatever the odds stacked up against me are, is worse than if I stayed at, because I know that I didn't graduate with straight A student as a straight A student. I'm not going to get into the four-year program colleges in the country. Even when I do, the employment rate is 5%. So what do I have to lose? It was a life and death moment for me.
Yeah.
It's like I'm going to take this chance because whatever I have to face on this path is better than that being stuck here. Because I saw around me what the people that didn't have the, even
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself privileged to even be involved in the game of golf because that's what it did for me. So it's perspective for the most part, but also it's really like developing and adapting that attitude of gratitude mindset very early. Like like you can't think about what you don't have. Like we
Yeah.
can spend the whole day talking about what we wish we had. So yeah, so that's really where it comes from for me.
And you've talked about faith several times, and I love the conversation of faith because I feel like people don't always understand faith or have a strong relationship with it. So I'd love if you could share where that relationship came from for you and what faith really means to you. And also, was there any point at all where your faith wavered?
This is the most important, like this is the most interesting part of this conversation. I'll tell you that because faith means everything to me. I grew up in a Christian home, but you grew up in a Christian home without understanding what that really means. My journey of pursuing golf always got me to points where I had to wonder if there's God, because it always got me
Mm,
to points where I said, if there's God, this is what, like, it was always like, I
mm,
need this. My parents can't provide me this. God, can you do something about this? So it always forced me to have conversation with myself, with my spirit within, and to dig deeper into that. And every time I got myself to the point where I was asking and exploring and really being seeking for something outside of what I saw, I seem to draw into this moment of peace, and sometimes some answers came through. And I think one of my very earliest memories was when my dad's like, we have started a competition today. Do not come to the golf club because I don't have the money for you to pay. I don't have the competition fees.
Mm.
I don't have the resources for you to play. And I'm looking around. I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna go to the golf club, and I go over there, and I'm like, I'm gonna say a prayer whilst I go over there. And I said a prayer. I'm like, God, if you can hear me this, I really want to play golf today. My dad said he doesn't want me to go to the golf club, but if I get over there, can you just soften his heart? And somehow I'm praying this prayer, and I get to the golf club, and I see him, like, he's like, what am I going to do with you? Go get your bag. You're playing today. And that's like, I was always stretching it. Now, fast forward to what that has meant now is that we are living in very tough times, and we are living in a different world right now. And I think that uh, in the absence of aspirations for a higher power, you really are so vulnerable. We have to draw our
Yeah.
strength. If you look around right now, if you have to draw strength from what we see around, it's very depressing. And you
Yeah.
have to get to the point where you have to believe in something higher. And for me, my faith in Christ has been that foundation for me because it gives me perspective. And it's not just having a relationship that's just there. It's a relationship that I'm in constant search of. Every day I study the Bible. Every day I listen to sermons and having mentorship in that same field. I belong to a fellowship group that I meet with. One of my biggest role models is Bill Rogers, who won the British Open in '81, and I meet with him once a week just for breakfast, just to talk about life. And I think it's really having the people that have similar interests, the people that are also either have achieved success, but they found ways to understand their definition is not in the success they've achieved. And these are people that are very humble and that are aiming higher. And it's for me being inquisitive and saying, so you've achieved what anybody in this world would die for. Yet you're so humble, yet you still do all these things. What is it? What has that like? What makes it that way for you? And it's having this very small, very intimate conversation where somebody like that can look at me, is like, listen, it's my faith in God. I want to know that type of God because, like, especially when you're younger or when you're pursuing success, you want to do this. You are so all in by all means. But these journeys sometimes get us to these breaking points where it can be very depressing. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's when you're seeking success and you get to the point where it's like, oh, is this it? I thought, because the assumption of what we perceive success to be is very different from what it feels like when you get to that point. And I've seen there's so many stories, there's so many books about people that were like all in, lost friends, lost family in that pursuit, and you get to this point and it becomes very lonely and they lose it. They've spent their entire life chasing something, and you get to this point where it's like, oh, it doesn't feel any different. And you realize it's just appreciating the smaller things: faith, family, friends, all of these things. And in the absence of that, life is pointless. So I think it's just that perspective and using that drive to whatever I aspire to get to in today. I really have to bring it back to perspective and understanding that the relationships that I have right now, my family, my wife, my kids, our family together, is more important than any amount of success I can ever get. And being realistic in that, because it's delusional sometimes, because what we perceive success is very different from the reality of success. And that's, I think, where a lot of the big problems we see are coming from.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that. I think faith is such an important thing. And there are a lot of people in my audience who believe in God, and there are a lot of people who believe in the universe or spirit or source or just the
Yeah.
energy that is something
Yeah.
bigger. And I have found for me it's so important. I was raised Catholic, so I still use the language of God,
Uh-huh.
but I
Yeah.
feel like I'm more spiritual now. And it really, to me, doesn't matter. It's having that faith in something greater and knowing that it's not on us as small humans in this big world to know
Yes.
everything and figure everything out. And I love that in the hard moments, rather than
Yes.
spiral, and maybe there was doubt or fear or whatever it was,
Yes.
but you leaned on that faith.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I really believe purpose is my purpose, and purpose is a big part of what we do in the company. When our desires and our goals and our visions for ourselves and our purpose path is anchored in purpose, which is rooted in a faith that is bigger than us and bigger than me,
Yes.
getting my shiny this or that,
Uh-huh.
it does keep you humble and it keeps you
Yes.
connected to what really matters.
Yes, yes, and it's more important. It's and you say it perfectly because, and I think it's everybody gets to this point where you. I think the biggest thing for me is getting to the point where you find it for yourself. Nobody can find faith for you. Faith is a very intimate,
Yes.
personal journey, and you get to this point where through life, through heartbreaks, through pain, through so many of these things, where you realize that it could go away just that quickly, and you ask the one important question is, oh, you really think you have control, and you realize you have zero control. And at that point, you realize that you have to draw strength from something outside of your reach right now. And it's a very vulnerable point, very vulnerable moment. But if you can get to that point and draw to that strength, whatever anybody calls it, and I have respect for that, for me, I know what that is, the definition of that. And that's what is very important. And me and you can meet today on that level of connection, and we'll speak the same language because we're drawing
Yes.
from the same source. And it's just important. And I hope more people experience that. But that journey, nobody gets there from a very comfortable position. You
Nope.
have to have gone through pain. You have to have found life. Like you have to have hit rock bottom. Something must have got you to where you
Yeah.
realize you can't do it by yourself. And that's the powerful thing, right? Like in my Christian faith, it took death for us to find the salvation that we have.
Yeah.
So it's meant everything for me, and it brings everything back into perspective for me. And you can't not be humble when you realize that you could lose it just like that. You could be gone just like that. You're not all that just like that. So, and for me, just my background of having so many people, my book Raised by the World, the title is because I realized that everything I've become did not just come from my own family and my own Bible. I was raised by the world because I met different people. They came through for me. They
Yeah.
did so much for me. So my perception of the world was global. People from different parts of the world have shared into my life, and they've meant so much to me. And that's where it comes from me. So it's a long, extensive topic, but over and above, faith is so important to me because I just know what it can do, and especially in today's
Absolutely.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. And something that I really love about you as a person, your body of work, and it sounds like this has been an conscious awareness throughout your entire journey, but the decision to give back to your country and to kids and to other people who didn't have the privilege or wouldn't otherwise have the privilege and the opportunity and the resources. And I would love to know, starting the foundation. I also want to talk about your writing in your book, but starting the
Uh-huh.
foundation, at what point did you know that you wanted to do that? And was there anything about that in and of itself that was challenging or felt impossible?
It came very quickly. It was because I realized that for me to get where I want to get, it's going to have to take other people to do something for me. And when I realized that I had to have a very realistic chance and conversation with myself to know that I anything that we've been able to fortunately do for the foundation is everything I wish somebody did for me. So I was that kid that needed somebody to pay their school fees. I
Yeah.
had the Lions Club pay for my primary education because we paid for school fees when I was going to school from first to 12th grade. In seventh grade, I won a tournament that was sponsored by the Lions Club, and they paid for my entire year of school. They bought me school uniforms. And so I was that kid. And I think that, and it goes back again to that faith journey. God gets us through these positions because we have to relate to people that experience the things we experience. And that's
Yeah.
purpose, and purpose, right? It's like everything that we ever aspire to do is things that I wish somebody did for me. So the decision to give back for me has been the easiest for me. It's because I know anything I have, any form of privilege that I have, is not for me, is to make this world a better place. And to me, I've experienced, you know, I've experienced my fair share of success already, and I think that nothing is as fulfilling as the opportunity to see
Mm.
another person smile because of some of the actions you've
Yeah,
been privileged to do. And it's I do that with absolute honor, and it's something that I'm really hoping, and we'll get to talk to about our next biggest project, but it's just the decision and the opportunity to give back cannot be compared to anything.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And it's, again, when your desire is rooted in your purpose and you're purpose driven, you inherently think of others in
Yes,
everything that
yes,
you're doing
yes.
because nothing is
Yep,
ever just about us.
yep. You become selfless, and it's really. And I would have thought, I thought that's the easiest something. Like everybody's like that, and I get surprised every now and again. I have a conversation, and you realize that sometimes you either run into people that don't think like that, or don't just see it that way, or are very self-centered, and I can't relate to that because, like, to me, that's all I saw. It was everybody helping each other. Like, but I think there's an advantage to having so much. It's that it's never it hides away the opportunity for you to see the big picture of community. When you're growing up in those African countries and smaller countries where you need your survival is dependent on either somebody in the community seeing you through for the last few days of the month, or going to the
Yeah.
neighbor's house to because you don't have a freezer to go and put your water in there so they can give you some cold water, or asking for salt, for instance, asking for eggs, things like that. They make you realize very quickly that you survive by community, and community makes everything work. uh, but sometimes it's very difficult when you grow up in an environment like America, for instance, or these developed countries where you don't necessarily see that. Nobody needs
Right.
anybody really. Everybody is survives. They make good money and they do well. It's very difficult to learn some of those very important life skills and values.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think we can't really control everything else. But for as much as we can control within our reach, we have to do what we have to do, which is make the world a better place.
Yeah. And let's talk about your book a little bit. I love that you were writing as you were going through the journey. I think documenting is so important, and I think that we have kind of confined that only to social media, and it doesn't have to be that way. And
Uh-huh.
maybe you're not out there wanting to write a book, whoever's listening, but documenting your journey can help you and can help other people. And so I love that you were doing that. And at what point did you realize that you were writing a book, and how much of that actually ended up in your book?
Almost all of it. It was from my time in England when I started recording these moments and these meetings. And it wasn't like really like saying, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to write everything. It's basically like, I want to write just everything I feel right now. Like, I'm so scared to get into this meeting. Maybe like if I go into this meeting and just show them that I'm really focused, I want to do this. Maybe they'll see it another way. Maybe the school will give me a pass or something like that. It's really just collecting all these moments and memories to me that felt very important. And as I started going around, but then also, so I finished my time in the UK, went back to Zambia, and we've gone through this struggle of me going to the UK, going through all the things that I went through, and I get to Zambia and I can't find work, and I'm back at my father's house, and it's depressing because a lot of the times when somebody leaves for the Western countries, you go for greener pastures, and it's very instant. Everybody expects that you're coming back into wealth and you have everything you desire.
Mm.
So I went back, regular guy, no job, nothing happening. And I really hit this moment of depression. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Like, I put in my heart and soul, God, what's going on over here? And it's those relationships. I find work, and I eventually find a really good position in Zambia, and I'm doing well, and very instinctive. Like, I've always been very instinctive. Like, I'm listening to the third person within me. What's that voice? What should I do? And it's having that voice telling me what I think I should do. To me now, I realize it's a spirit that's inspiring me to
Yeah.
take certain different actions. And the more of those actions I took, and seeing clearly now, because originally when I took that step to go to the UK, I didn't have anything. When I had the chance to come to America, I had everything. but I still had to obey that voice because it was just so strong for me.
Yeah.
But that voice meant going again, not having enough of what I had, and leaving a place of comfort. So it was two extremes from the beginning to from the original moment to the second moment. And I went to my dad, and he's like, "Oh, like you must be crazy. Like you are helping us, you're supporting us. Why would you go to America? You're gonna have to go through the same things that you went through when you were in England." And it's those decisions that made me realize that I was called for more than just for
Yeah.
myself. And realizing that made me realize very quickly that at some point my story is going to have to be shared with people. It's because I was making these very, very, very personal decisions, but affecting so much around me, And so when I did that, that's when I seriously started putting the notes together. It was between, I want to say it was 2008, I started putting notes together, to 2020 when everything came together. It was such a long process, but things started making sense, especially as I drew closer to becoming a PGA golf professional. Because I knew that if I ever become this, it needed to be a story to be told. I didn't realize everything else that has happened after
Mm.
that. It never even dawned on me. But it was almost of that when you're so focused on the next step, right?
Yeah.
You put everything into that next step, and it's not until you get to that point that you realize and see and you get the idea of what else is coming. And I think it's God's way of protecting me and my vision. I thought, because like if I really saw the whole picture, it would have been too much for me to even like, oh, I'm not doing that. So yeah, so getting to that point, that's really when I realized that, what, this is worth putting into a book. And I started putting all the resources together, asking questions. I remember when one of my first drafts, I sent it to this person. I found this online platform of people that you could edit your book. She's like, "You have nothing over here. This is not," like, sent me the worst email. And I was just laughing because at this point I had so much thick skins. Like, nobody tells me what I cannot do. And
Mm.
and now to actually having the book published and looking at the people that have read the book and looking at the comments that I've got, the stories that I've heard, people reading my book, and I've shared some of them in my book. It's it's an incredible blessing to experience, and it makes me very humble, but also
Yeah.
extremely very grateful, because it's a full circle moment. It's definitely like it's nobody could have ever seen it.
Absolutely. Well, tell everybody more about the foundation, where they can find you, how they can support any projects that are coming up that you're excited about, and where they can find you online. We'll link to everything in the show notes, but I'd love for you to share.
We'll share my online platforms, but everything is on my website, vincentkabaso.com. And every year we try. So the foundation basically, we have operations in Zambia. Every month we host mentorship programs. So one of the biggest things I realized was that when I was growing up, we didn't have anybody telling me this is what it takes to be a doctor, this is what it takes to be a lawyer. So we designed a program that runs every month. We scout two schools from some of the least positioned areas. And we host sessions every weekend, every Saturday, and we host a session and we just have a conversation with the kids. What do you want to be? I want to be a doctor. I want to be a lawyer. And somebody will just go over there and they'll share the experience. This is what you have to do to be a lawyer. This is what,
Wow.
just open their minds up to
Yeah.
what it takes for them to be what they want to be. And I think that's the conversation of what it be like, because like sometimes we have all these aspirations without really understanding what it takes. So we try to open kids up, their mind that way. But we use, so the country manager running the foundation, my good guy, does a fantastic job. He was a volunteer originally when he came on board. He was a student of the university in Zambia, and he came on a voluntary basis. Now he's grown on and he's graduated and he's working for us full time. And so we try to recruit all these college students because I think part of it is that they don't have so much to do outside of college. And I think that what we're trying to do is create a platform for them to use their time away from school most efficient and effective, which is we want them to come on board. share their experience with some of these kids. I'm at the University of Zambia, for instance. I'm studying medicine. This is what I have to focus on. This is what I have to do. And then we'll give them a little allowance. And we try to do those things. And hopefully at some point we're going to get into every school in the country. But we're proud of what we've done. We've had an impact on at least 5,000 kids right now.
Wow.
And it's going to go on for as long as, we can support it. And my wife and I primarily support that. Last year, I did a very interesting challenge. I did the ice dive in Minnesota to try and raise money for that same cause. So every now and again, we'll have events to fundraise, but primarily just my wife and I just use whatever God has blessed us with to channel to that good cause.
So powerful. Thank you for sharing. Yes, we will link to everything. And final question for anyone in the audience who's trying to do something that feels impossible because of circumstance, lack of resource, belief, whatever it may be, what's a piece of advice you would leave them with?
It would be that anybody, and I believe this strongly, anybody that's achieved any success of any worth and not had to do something they think they couldn't do. Nobody has ever got to any position thinking they had everything they could do within themselves. So doubt is normal. Fear is normal. Insecurities are normal. But the difference is the people that actually go beyond those things and actually take the step to do something about it. And we're living in an age of information right now, so it's really finding the right people that can motivate you to that process. My thing is reading. I want to read the books that resonate with me and my journey and the people that have done the things that I want to do. So nothing is ever impossible. It's about the mind and your heart and just the ability to make a decision. It's one thing to desire to do all of these things, but actually being able to make the decision, that's really where it comes to. So I think that that's really what I would say.
Yes, I agree 100%. Thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, for sharing so many aspects of your story and your work and who you are. I really, really appreciate it.
Stephanie, this was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.